any thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, I can, again, give you my experience. And I mean, the only value that I had initially when I moved to Silicon Valley was the bringing deals. And the way I did it is I marketed, you know, my strength is marketing and kind of the metrics-based marketing concepts and business development. So when October hit, I pretty much went to angels that had portfolio companies in trouble and said, listen, I'll go in there for a week and at least set them up with the proper dashboard that you can then feel some level of comfort. So I went in and did this for several companies, sat down with the entrepreneurs, and then word got around, and all of a sudden when companies were essentially at the formation level and they were thinking, who are good investors that we would want part of this? Because I'll tell you, it's a popularity contest. There's really no way getting around it. Down there, there's so many entrepreneurs. If you have a really great idea, they're really, to some degree, in the driver's seat. So that's the way I started you know, adding value to other angel investors is I would get the call from these entrepreneurs, meet with them, do some due diligence, and then bring it to them, and they would reciprocate. And I always only brought them the best deals because the one great thing about social media is transparency, but the also bad thing is transparency. And if you do something, you know, and this is funny, I had the other part that I don't like is investors that say they're investors, but they're not active, and that started happening like crazy after October. But they would still like, hey, did you hear this company? Or hey, have you, you should look at this deal. And it's like, I mean, that's the other part that I don't like, and I quickly weeded those out. It took me, you know, a couple months. But the finding investors, much like co-founders, much like building a business, I use my gut. And if I was talking with somebody who was bringing me a deal, or somebody said, you know, there's this guy, he's an investor, you should talk to him, and I just didn't feel like he was the type of person that would get along. Not me, there's nothing bad with them, it's just I invest with people that I seem to have chemistry with, and so far it's worked out, and I think that was the, that's a filter for me, is like when I do co-investments is, you know, because like I want, like you said, I want to do more deals with that person and create relationships and longevity. It's not a one-off transaction and it's a great deal and there's a lot of money to be made everywhere, as you might as well be doing with people you really enjoy. And that's been one kind of filter I've used, and really just adding as much value not only to the entrepreneurs but to the investors and letting them know when you've heard them maybe get into a deal that you know something behind the scenes. One thing that's been interesting for me over the last year is what gets written about in the news versus what happens with the investors. It's like so mafia style, like they talk about the PayPal mafia and the Google mafia, like it really goes on. I mean, they're a very close-knit group and they call each other and they're doing due diligence, and it's been really interesting to see that, you know, behind the scenes.
But I think that's part of the circles of trust that get built up, whether it's viewed as a family situation or not. And I think that's part of what some of us today have called north-south or cross-border. I would say cross-geography or cross-geographical investing is NAO Canada, ACA, the regional affiliations are building trust and building relationships. And there are two dynamics that I'm seeing set in for breaking investing outside geography. One are these relationships that are getting formed in discussions of best practices, sharing diligence. I'm on the phone with my colleagues in Silicon Valley now, say, hey, I just saw this company, I know there must be 10 like them, can you help me with the competitive diligence? Or, oh, you know, this company I'm dealing with, it's got to be bi-coastal from day one. It's got Boston technology, but it's got Silicon Valley consumer marketing. I really want you in this deal, and we will collaborate and cooperate. So the associations are already building some of these relationships, and also the longer-term relationships that'll lead, if you misbehave, you know, everyone will know it, with or without Twitter. And my handle is @commonangels.com. If you say nice things, use it. If you don't. And then the second is, and I find this particularly fascinating, and I don't know where it's going exactly, is the further growth of angel funds. So this is the hottest topic, at least within ACA. I expect it's a hot topic within AO as well. And there are different motivations for forming angel funds. Some it's capacity, some of it's capturing internal capital, some of it's cohesion. But one of the things that's happened within Common Angels, since we have two funds, is we've actually developed geographical reach with it. So we have 38 LPs in our first fund and 66 in our second. And over time, those people have moved. Imagine that. And so now I have a couple investors in California. I have some in New York. I've had investors from other geographies who've been in individual deals with us. We have personal relations say, oh, you're raising a new fund? I'm interested, I'd like to join. Well, guess who my first phone call is when I have something that needs that diligence? And they're sending me deals too. And there's a contractual level of trust. I have their money and I'm accountable to them. And with more and more groups raising funds, either within the local sphere, but then those people disperse or aggregate relationships to bring them back. I think of some of the university-oriented funds that tap into alumni groups. This just strikes me as a powerful vehicle to create those type of trusted platforms that lead to trans-geographic or cross-geographic investing.
Do you see that being able to jump borders?
Oh, absolutely. And particularly Canada's harmonization of its tax law with the U.S. on LLCs a couple of years ago is going to make that much easier, I would expect. A few years ago, my attorneys basically said, most of these funds are formed as LLCs or LPs, so they do not take money from Canada. Like, you may go to any other country in the world, and not quite literally, but something like that. And the Canadian tax law changed, and vice versa. Don't invest in a Canadian LLC because of the disharmony with the U.S. tax regime. Well, that went away. I had a meeting recently with our fund attorneys, and they said, oh, it's not an issue. Don't worry about it. Don't even blink.
And Dan, being from New Brunswick, you've been looking at that north-south or east-west kind of like.
I'm leading a deal right now that's New Brunswick based, and I live in San Francisco. Alan, the last 3 deals I did before that were all California. One was actually in Boston from Techstars. I just find it really fun because it's kind of like cross-pollination as well. I mean, when you start investing in companies in Waterloo is an area that I just recently I'm new to this, so I went there about 3 weeks ago and I hung out with the entrepreneurs and talked to them and met some of the people at Communitech. And I'm just learning about my Eastern Canadian counterparts in Canada. So I think a lot of that cross-border is going to be very interesting, and Alan talking about the world is flat. I get excited when I can do a deal, and as I mentioned earlier, from a company that can provide me the information so that I understand there's a level of comfort. I was talking last night with a lot of angels. It's the entrepreneurs that give you insight when things are bad as well as when they're doing good. And I think with technology, anyways, in my space, it's not uncommon for me to have 12 different accounts for Google Analytics so that I can keep, in real time if I chose to. And if that's the case, then other than tax issues, there's really no reasons why we can't be doing a lot more north-south, I guess that's what it's called, co-investing across companies in different geographies.
Boston's east, though, of here.
Yeah.
I think my house is a little bit
North and east?
Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Good. We want to make this interactive as possible as well. So maybe what I can do is just maybe get any other closing thoughts that you might have on any of the general themes, and then we can get questions from the audience. James?
I'm interested in what they're interested in.
Okay.